Welcome to the Gastro Girl podcast. We bring together patients, experts, and health advocates who are all here to help you optimize your health. Here's your host, Jacqueline Garland.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Gastro Girl podcast. I am so excited today because I have an amazing guest, Dr. Sabine Hazan, who is a world-renowned expert in the microbiome. She's not only CEO of Probiotics and Ventura clinical trials and the author of the Let's Talk Shit book, but she's also a practicing gastroenterologist in the California area. And we're so grateful to see you today. Welcome, Dr. Hazan.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so we met in person. I've kind of been like a groupie of yours, looking at all your amazing research that you've done on the microbiome. And you really shed some light for the medical industry on a lot of important things related to our bodies and our digestive health. And one of the things that we talked about at ACG in Vancouver, which is the American College of Gastroenterology's annual scientific meeting, was your presidential award poster that looked at whether all of these probiotic infused products actually contain what they say they do. And your study finds most labels actually mislead consumers. And this was like boggled my mind because I'm one of those kombuchas, yogurt, all this. And I'm like, we really got to get the scoop from you. So I'm so grateful you're here. So tell us, like, what were the key findings of your research?
So it was kind of a path, right? So, our lab, Probiotics, discovered COVID in the stools, the whole genome, not just a little piece of the virus. And so when we found the virus, the whole genome, we were looking at what kills it, right? Here we have a stool sample that basically with precision can tell us the whole entire sequence of the virus, but not only like one or two, but like thousands of copies. So giving us an idea that perhaps people have COVID in their stools and keep them a little bit longer, right? So we discovered like a kid with Tourette's that had COVID in her stools for up to 6 months, published that. And then from there, we started looking at the microbiome, like, well, what is going on in the microbiome? And I did the Malibu microbiome meeting with Dr. Stolman at the beginning, our first meeting that was actually canceled during COVID. So we had to do a Zoom meeting with a lot of doctors. And my lecture was basically looking at the microbiome, explaining to people what is the microbiome, to doctors, to physicians, right? And so the first thing I said, well, here's an opportunity for me to look at my database and maybe help in some way with the pandemic by looking at what do the old people have that is different than the young people. Remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we had all these people with risk factors, right? So, right. The young were doing great, but the old were like dying really fast. So I said to myself, what is the difference in their microbiome? One of the key features that I discovered, and really because I was looking at newborns, and at the same time, I was looking at old people dying that came to me for like hope for maybe fecal transplant. Remember fecal transplant, the process of taking poop, putting it into a colon of a person with C. diff. That's all it's approved for right now, right? So when we started as a community of doctors, of GI doctors, seeing other things, Dr. Sahil Khanna with chronic UTI, Dr. Neil Stolman, Dr. Colleen Kelly with alopecia areata improving, all these things kind of put me in this path of trying to understand the microbiome. So I started collecting stools as I started Probiotics, really with the intent to do 57 clinical trials on the microbiome and disease. So I had a huge database when COVID happened. And then this Malibu microbiome meeting, I got to take a look at it. When I looked at the difference, one of the key microbe that was different was this bacteria called Bifidobacteria. So Bifidobacteria, if you'll remember, and for most who don't know, is the bacteria that started the whole probiotic industry, right? It is, found in newborns, and it is not found in dying patients, right? It is the process of aging. You're born with a lot and you die with zero. So to me, Bifidobacteria, I said to myself, I wonder if people with severe COVID have zero BIF and people exposed to people with COVID have a lot of BIF. So I started testing a lot of families. So the first paper I published was the second or third paper I published on the subject was a discordant family, where I took a family of 4, 3 never had COVID, 1 had COVID. The difference in those 3 that didn't have COVID was their bifidobacteria level was really high. Now, obviously, it's not just bifidobacteria, right? Because as we get to this point in our 50s, we have less bifidobacteria, but we have other microbes that kind of pop up that is our resilient microbe, if you want to put it that way. So, but I started looking specifically at bifidobacteria. So the key difference with these 3 people, and one of them was older than the kid who had COVID, the kid with COVID had 0 bifidobacteria. So then I go to another family, and it was a family of 6, and 5 of them had COVID, but the newborn didn't have COVID. Again, the newborn had a lot of bifidobacteria, never had COVID. The 5 had 0 bifidobacteria. So they were clearly doing something that was affecting their microbiome, right? To have 0, that kind of got them to, and this was a relatively young family. I mean, they were in their the parents were in their 30s, the newborns were newborns. So for me to see a newborn with a lot of bifidobacteria, the kids with very little bifidobacteria and the parents 0 bifidobacteria, I kind of said, let me look at more, right? So then I went on a path of, okay, I got to look at more severe patients. So I started asking my colleagues and, Neil and people, that were in the community of doctors that were on the front line. I said, anybody that's severely dying of COVID, can you please, send me their poop? And because that's what I'm known for, right?
I'm sorry.
I'm a poop collector. I mean, I'm going to have a t-shirt. You have Gastro girl, I'm going to have poop collector. So I get, I want to know. I want to see. I have like this incredible thirst for knowledge. So to me, it doesn't matter that I'm playing with poop or collecting poop. It's really what is in the poop that's fascinating to me.
Right.
So, we had 72 patients, and a small number were my control with a high BIF. And then I had, my severe COVID, who had a lot of loss of bifidobacteria, loss of Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, and loss of diversity. So that became our signature in a way, difference between the people that are exposed, high risk, to the people that, that had severe.
So you've really established like a sort of a path to the research that we're going to be talking about today, because you're establishing this really strong connection between the lack of bifidobacteria in the microbiome in someone's body into what's happening on a disease state and getting something like COVID.
Correct. So it was kind of a path, right? So at some point, I killed my bifidobacteria. So obviously I realized bifidobacteria is so important, right? And, I started looking at the data of people that are taking probiotics versus people that are taking, no probiotics, right? In my database. One of the papers we published, it's not a great study, it's just kind of an overlook. But we started questioning people and said, well, what kind of probiotic are you taking? Because you have 0 bifidobacteria. And then some people were taking like high quality regulated probiotics, and they had some, bifidobacteria in them. But some people really had 0 bifidobacteria. So the question became, is it because of the poor quality? Is it because of the probiotics themselves are, say, bifidobacteria, but there's no bifidobacteria? Or is the bifidobacteria itself dead, right? I mean, think about, we're supposed to mimic the microbiome, which is anaerobic. It doesn't breathe oxygen, right? Are these microbes exposed to oxygen, put in a capsule, and therefore dead? So in other words, you find them by genetic sequencing, you find bifidobacteria, but it's not alive. It's not growing. So and my mind was like, what is dead bifidobacteria doing to the microbiome, right? Is a dead bacteria, could it impact a live microbiome, right? So for one. For two, what about the probiotics that don't have bifidobacteria and have all sorts of other junk in there? Is that junk affecting and killing the bifidobacteria? And so I started looking into, we came to find out, and if you look at the literature, 16 out of 17 probiotics out there mislead the consumer. They don't even have bifidobacteria in them. And then the other thing we discovered is if you test and which was my discovery because I was drinking this kefir, right?
Oh yeah, me too. I love that stuff.
And, no name kefir from my area, from my neighborhood, in California. And I was like, how come my bifidobacteria is not like higher? How come I'm still, because I killed my bif without saying what I killed. I'm publishing my case, so it's going to be coming out. It's like my case through the pandemic. But essentially, I killed my bif. And I was like, how come I'm drinking a ton of kefir and it's not increasing my bif? So I decided on a whim, and remember, these genetic tests are really expensive. I mean, like in the thousands, okay?
Yes.
So I take a piece of the kefir, which is like, a $5 bottle, and it's costing me like a couple $1,000 to analyze the kefir. And my lab director thought I was crazy, but I'm like, I need to know because here I am drinking it, thinking it's improving me, right? And here I am telling my patients to drink it. And if it's not raising the bifidobacteria, what's the point of drinking that, right? Am I just drinking junk? So to my surprise, we didn't find bifidobacteria in that kefir. So no wonder, even though it said on the label, bifidobacteria. So as a detective that I am, and will tell you, don't get Sabine involved because she's just going to go on this path. And I go to stores in my neighborhood, okay? Like all the grocery stores in my neighborhood. And I pick up all the yogurts and all the drinks that say bifidobacteria in there. And literally just drop them in the lab. And I'm like, here, collect. My lab director, again, had a conniption because, we're so tight in the lab because we're basically, there's no funds. We don't have any grants or anything like that. So we're basically so tight. And here I am spending money. Every time I bring, like, whether it's coyote poop or elephant poop, they're like, they have a conniption because they're like, what are we doing, Dr. Hazan? But I want to know, right? I want to know what's the poop in the elephant.
No, and now you're having me I'm like, if I had a microscope in my office, I would probably be doing the same thing. No, just joking. But seriously, it's alarming because we're so pushed as consumers that all this stuff is good for us and we're trying to buy it in good faith to improve our health. And when actuality, it's not doing anything.
No. And so what happened was I discovered that only 3 out of the 26, actually there were probably about 29 products we tested, had bifidobacteria in them.
That's crazy.
One of them had a bacteria called B. cereus, which is like B. cereus, but it's like Bacillus cereus, which is essentially a microbe that gives you vomiting and diarrhea. So you can imagine the poor guy's taking this drink, he's drinking it, he's thinking he's improving his gut. That night he's vomiting and diarrhea.
Oh my God.
And he's thinking it was probably a stomach flu, but really it was the drink he drank. So yeah, it's unfortunate. We are trusting these products, right? I went to this grocery store and I'm looking at the way they package and remove like yogurts, right? And the yogurt was left over the counter for a couple of hours before the guy even put it back into the fridge. So imagine this yogurt comes from a fridge to a fridge postal and then stays on the counter. Maybe there's it started carrying something happened in those 2 hours where the yogurt was outside and then they put it back in the fridge, right? So, I've become a more aware consumer, right? I tend to shop at local stores where I trust the quality, where I know the person is carrying my yogurt and he's taking it out of the truck and putting it directly in the fridge. So, that's the thing.
So it's alarming, but it's also informative. So, yes. One of the most hot topics and questions that we get over and over again is, do I need a probiotic, number one? How do I pick the right probiotic? And do they work? And how do I know they work?
Right.
So this is an endless discussion. So what is your advice for patients? This is so confusing it's so confusing.
Yeah. So the sad part is we are not there in science to kind of have a test, right? So what Probiotics is trying to bring out a test, but it's very expensive and it takes funding to go through the regulatory. It takes a lot of, dealing with the FDA. And we want to do it the right way, right? To not just come out with a test as a consumer. We want to have the FDA say, yes, you're right, bring this test to market.
You're talking about a test to
You need
evaluate the microbiome to see
not
what
just
someone's...
microbiome, but just your level of Bifidobacteria, right?
Okay.
Your accurate level of Bifidobacteria. Because what is the accurate? And here's the thing. So what I've been doing in my practice is, because I do research, is I get to analyze the microbiome of all patients, right? Under a research umbrella. And then from there, of course, patients try vitamin C, they try taking zinc, they try, we published a great paper actually that shows vitamin C increases the Bifidobacteria, which was not shocking to me, because when you have a virus, the first thing you pop is a vitamin C, right? So when we discovered that, we said, well, let's look at the microbiome, right? Why are some vitamin C increasing and not another vitamin C? What is happening in the patient, right? So here's what we've discovered using our research tool. We discovered that, unfortunately, yes, there's a bunch of roadblocks to improving health. So if your patient, you're giving him probiotics and he's not improving, it's because there's other things that you're giving him that is killing the Bifidobacteria. So in other words, I'm thinking of the guy that's drinking, a big bottle of alcohol, right? And then he's eating his probiotics. Well, on one hand, you're trying to raise the Bifidobacteria, but then on the other hand, you're killing it with that third or fourth glass of tequila. Although, if you listen to Dr. Stallman's lecture, he'll tell you one glass of tequila improves the Bifidobacteria. But one whole bottle of tequila may not, right? So, there's a lot of research that needs to be done still to see everything that's killing the Bifidobacteria and everything that's growing. So we're at the beginning of research on this. So for me to come and say, yeah, take this probiotics, you're going to be fixed. Right. No, we need to understand what are all the things that are killing. Remember when we figured out reflux in GI, we realized that there was a junction problem where the LES was kind of dysfunctional and was weak. And we discovered that there were certain things. And I remember doing those studies with Dr. Sami Akem at University of Florida. We realized if you give people, 4 cups of coffee a day and they're not drinking, and then all of a sudden they drink 4 cups of coffee, you're going to weaken that valve and then they're going to start refluxing, right? Then you start noticing, well, if you give them mint, same thing. If you give them chocolate, same thing. So this was a long process of research to understand just reflux, like what is opening the LES and what is closing the LES, right? We are at the level right now of what is killing the Bifidobacteria and what is allowing it to grow. But here's the problem. There's so much confusion. People are sick. And we also need to showcase to the community and now I'm seeing Stanford actually doing some studies on Bifidobacteria. I like to believe I was behind that to plant a seed in some doctor to say, you know what, maybe Sabine's onto something with Bifidobacteria. And then some other doctor in NYU and some other doctor at Brown, Harvard, so they could start reproducing the data to see, am I real? What am I seeing? Because all research needs to be valid, verified, and reproducible. Otherwise, it's not research. I could be wrong. My assay could be off, this is why it's research, right? So it's important to do the research. We're not there yet. Here's the other thing. When you do find that, so we discovered not only, vitamin C increases Bifidobacteria, but we also discovered key diseases like Crohn's disease in people that didn't take any medications, that were naive to treatment, started off potentially with 0 Bifidobacteria. Autism could possibly start with 0 Bifidobacteria. What else? Lyme disease. We've noticed patients with Lyme disease have 0 Bifidobacteria compared to a healthy control. Invasive cancer. We looked at our database and we looked at people with invasive cancer versus people with non-invasive cancer. Invasive cancer had 0 Bifidobacteria. So of course we're starting. So we have to kind of say, okay, you know what? Sabine's right. We need to focus on the Bifidobacteria. From there, I need to convince the regulatory agencies to say, hey, I did this test. I showed all this. Can you put my test to market so I could see a bigger group of patients so we can have bigger data, collaborations with universities, etc., to kind of now develop an immune marker where we could say maybe loss of bifidobacteria, maybe high bacteroides, might be, or low, or, whatever that marker is of immunity. Maybe we need to start there to say, yes, we need to focus on finding a marker and asking the government to let us use that as a marker. And then from there, do a lot more studies. And then from there, once we've established that marker, say, okay, what is increasing, what is decreasing? Then take the probiotics and start testing them individually. Once you've removed all the things that are killing, to basically say, yes, this probiotic works on this person, this group. Maybe probiotics are working only in certain races, right? Maybe it doesn't implant in certain people, so we don't know.
Yeah. I think this is such a fascinating area. And what I wanted to go back on is a couple things. So our listeners, we don't want to scare our listeners. We don't want to tell them to go out and eat a bunch of vitamin C because they're going to boost their, an overdose on that. But what we want to do is maybe explain why bifidobacteria is so key and why we keep talking about that. And I think that's what you were establishing earlier on the connection between COVID.
Yeah. So low bifidobacteria has been linked with asthma, has been linked with Lyme, has been linked with Crohn's, has been linked with invasive cancer. It is not necessarily, take the vitamins, right? So, people that we're coming out with a marker, signature microbiome of people with anxiety, right? It is not just about the pills and the probiotics. It is also about what you do in your life. Are you anxious? Are you working super hard? I have these people that want to get fixed and they take these probiotics that work for some people, but then because those people are kind of like calm and they're letting things implant, right? And then you've got these people that are flying to my office on a private jet, landing, and they're like, fix me right away, and then go back to their private jet in a rush. That person is not going to get fixed. They need to zone, calm down their system, go meditate, go hike, so yes, you're absolutely right. The answer is not take vitamin C. First of all, vitamin C, we did the study within 24 hours. We didn't do the study like, hey, let's look at what vitamin C does after you take it in 48 hours, in 72 hours. I can tell you it goes down. So this way you don't have to kind of worry and say, oh my God, I'm going to take vitamin C and it's going to increase. No, all you're doing is you're increasing with that 24 hours. And then next thing you know, it's dropping. So we do need to do more studies on this. And we do need to see all the factors that are improving. Here's the other thing that's interesting. And that's why I don't want people rushing to get the probiotic and all that, because there's so many wrong probiotics out there. And here's the problem. If you have if your gut is making bifidobacteria and you're healthy, don't change anything. You're fine. You've done fine during the pandemic. Stick to what you're doing, because essentially that tells you whatever you're doing, you're probably doing it right? So I think, my concern with overdoing it with probiotics and the wrong probiotics is that you could also kill your microbiome that way as well. So I think, a lot of calming the system. I think we've been pushed in this in the world with the whole pandemic to react, we're panicking. We're, sometimes you got to just calm down and figure out the situation and figure out your body a little bit better.
Yeah. So going back to your study, I think what this does is a good public service to raise awareness that not everything is as it seems in the grocery store, and that labels can be misleading. So if you're taking all these things and you're not seeing the results that you expect, know that possibly the probiotics in those drinks aren't the right ones, or they're not activated, or they're not working.
Yeah.
Right?
Or they're just not there. They're not present.
They're not there. Yeah, they're not present. So from this conversation, what are the top things that you would like patients to know based on what we're talking about? What do you think are the key takeaways here?
I think people need to, one of the key takeaways, calm down the system, not get into the massive PR and marketing that tells you, here's a new probiotics. It's going to make you lose weight. It's going to do this, because truthfully, it may not do anything for you, and it may do something worse to you, because we are dealing with microbes, right? And unfortunately, when microbes do not pass through the rigorous testing of the FDA and they come out as a product, and consumer just jump on it, they increase the profits of the company, but they may not really be serving their best interests. So I think that's one. Number two, because I know everybody's going to kind of call you and say, oh, what are the 3 probiotics? Remembering that every store is different, right? Every processing of the products is different, right? So in South Carolina, their kefir might be amazing and full of tons of Bifidobacteria. My store, I didn't happen to have it. So, when we do these studies, they're small studies. We only tested 26 to 29 products. Don't make your life about 26 to 29 products. Be aware of, if something's not working. If your bowels are gassy, bloating, maybe there's something in that product you eat. Be a vigilant consumer, right? Know your farm, know your products, know where everything is made. Look at the ingredients. That's the key message. And then re-educate yourself on nutrition. There's so much out there on gut health, on how to eat properly. Try different things. If vegan diet doesn't work for you, move to vegetarian diet, move to meat diet. So that's another, key message. Medicine is not a pill. It's also that relationship you have with a physician. Find a good physician, a good gastroenterologist that will listen to you. Take a diary, play detective with you, and go to that person, and don't expect too much out of them, because we're not there in the research, right? I think too many patients come and they're like, oh, my doctor didn't test my microbiome. Yeah, rightfully so. There are no tests that are really valid, verified, and reproducible right now. All I'm doing is research, right? So, give some slack to your doctors. If your doctors don't know about bifidobacteria, educate them, show them the data, bring them in so they can start being inquisitive, and they can start educating themselves, and they can start looking for solutions themselves to help their patients. So, those are the big things. And then, of course, I'm a big, quality vitamins, quality nutrients, quality food. We live in a world where our foods, unfortunately, are manipulated. Our, vitamins have a lot of junk in them sometimes. Our honey, I saw a report the other day that there's fake honey out there.
Oh, I saw that too. I was like crushed.
Oh my God. So so get to know where you get your honey from. Go to a local farm, get to know the farmer, get a couple beehives I have a couple beehives. Ever since I saw that, I'm like, well, I might as well start being a beekeeper.
I had neighbors where I lived previously, and they had hives, and they would give me this honey, and it was so cool to have
amazing.
this like honey that was made right next door.
Well, I told my gardener, I said, I want 10 hives. And now I'm going to be making, my daughter, doesn't like my vitamins. She likes gummy bears. So and if you look at gummy bears also have a lot of junk in them. So yes. I told my gardener, I got a company to start making me gummy bear vitamins with my honey from my garden.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, because I'm like, look, you have to go back to basics, right? You have to start making your own probiotic yogurt. You have to start, testing. You have to be a researcher. If you're having digestive problem, listening to the fighting on the radio and the TV is not going to help you. Getting upset about what may never happen is not going to help you. Calm down, hiking. Dr. Neil Stoneman is a huge hiker.
Oh, yes.
And I learned from him during the pandemic. I was following him with all his hiking trails, this is what gets you healthy. Medicine is not just a pill. It's really,
I love that medicine is not just a pill. And also, I want to bring and give a shout out to the registered dietitians, especially GI registered
yes,
dietitians, who can work with you and
yes,
your health condition or symptom to see what the best dietary
yes.
intervention is for you, right?
Exactly. And the psychologists that
Yes,
are helping with the trauma.
yes,
You know, if you've had a trauma, and by the way, I think COVID, has a lot of PTSD for a lot of people. So if you're that person that is sensitive to that trauma that got affected during COVID, talk to someone. This is why medicine, again, is not just a pill. It's talking to someone. It's the right nutrition. It's the right meditation person. It's the right yoga instructor. It's that dance class, that music you listen to. If something upsets you, that movie you're watching, I watch comedies now. I don't want to see anything gory with blood. I see enough blood
no.
in my job, scoping GI bleeders, that I don't want to see blood anymore. So I turn that off. Horror movies, turn it off. I go to comedy. I go to things that make me happy. That's laughter. Laughter probably improves the microbiome. You'll love this, by the way. I'm testing the microbiome of comedians. So
Interesting.
I'm taking the microbiome of famous comedians, and
But interesting because, some of the, I don't know if it's like stereotype about comedians that they're actually very insular, and some of them are depressed or anxious, and comedy is an
yes,
outlet for them. So it
yes,
would be interesting to see. That's a general
yeah, yeah,
stereotype, but I've known some comedians, and it seems like that's, quite common. That's an outlet for them, but it will be interesting to see what you discover. But this is such a side note in terms of watching. I have been so obsessed with this show. I just finished watching the second season, and talk about uplifting is a show called Love on the Spectrum.
Ooh,
I absolutely love this show,
yeah,
and
I'm
it
gonna
has
check
been
it out.
so heartwarming. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll be like, "Oh my
Yes,
God!" I encourage our listeners to watch it. It's great.
nice. Yes, nice, perfect.
But it's been so great having you on the show. I can't wait to have you back again. I'd love to talk about some of the other research projects that you have going on, learn more about your clinical trials, and more education for patients.
Yes,
So thank you so much. We'll put links to your book and
perfect.
your website and your abstract in this
Yeah,
episode.
everything's on the website. So,
And
Prajana,
yeah, perfect. So thank you so much, and we hope to have you back again.
thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Gastro Girl podcast. For more information and resources, please visit gastrogirl.com. Do you have a question for Gastro Girl? Please email podcast@gastrogirl.com. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in the Gastro Girl podcast are not a substitute for medical advice from your healthcare professional. Please consult a licensed clinician in your state regarding all matters related to your health.